Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about surfaces inside of your Inventor models. I do have 5 tips for using them, whether these are going to be a little bit more entry level so that even though you may not be doing any major surface modeling inside of Inventor, you'll still be able to maybe run into some of these or use them to leverage that tool inside of your designs. So just a little bit of an agenda for today. We are going to do a quick little introduction. We're going to overview of what surfaces are, and we're going to go through the 5 tips and finish up with a review. If you have any questions, I'm going to try to pause in between every tip, but also feel free to drop it in the Q&A and I'll try to answer them, or Christina will try to answer them for me or let me know to answer. Okay, a little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Marco Trinidad. I'm one of the application engineers here. I am on the support team, so if you send in a question to our support, I might be one of the application engineers to answer it. I did graduate from San Jose State University with my degree in mechanical engineering, and also I'm majoring into photography. If you watched one of my previous KVAs, you'd see I'd use some of the parts inside of my designs, and today I actually have another part that I'm going to use. All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and open up a surface file. So if I go over to open. Now, if you do have a step file, you do need to drop down the file type. So I'm going to drop it down. I'm going to select all files. I have an IGES file. That's the one that I'm going to open with the surfaces inside of it. It could be a step file depending on what file you receive. So if you're receiving maybe from an outside vendor or customer, you might get a file that's not necessarily an IPT, or maybe an even IPT with surfaces inside of it. So I'm going to go ahead and double click it to open. And you see this window pops up for importing. Now, this file I did create, so I do know it's all surfaces. So I can uncheck the solids. There's no solids inside of here. But really the option that I want to share is going to be the surface option. So individual is going to pop up each surface as its own separate feature. Composite is going to grab all those surfaces and put it inside of one single feature. Stitch is actually going to stitch the surfaces into a solid. This is only available if you have a fully enclosed surface model. And then construction is similar. It puts it inside of a separate folder where each surface is, each group of surfaces is its own composite. So I'm going to go ahead and select individual so I can show you a few different tips inside of here. So the first initial tip is some of you might receive a surface file and it looks like this. It's transparent. And this comes up a lot because it doesn't have any of the material, doesn't even look like the full part that I have. So this camera handle that I have here, it's actually supposed to be solid. So the first tip is to go ahead and select all of your features. So in this case, I have 75 different surfaces. I can right click and there is a translucent option, and that will bring it back to a solid looking design. Now, another thing that comes up is now that we have this surface model, let's say we can't stitch it into a solid. Let's say it's missing some of these surfaces, so I can't quite make it a solid. Now, if I go into a drawing, so I'm going to create a new drawing. If I drop this part in here, first thing I got to do is save it. If I drop this surface in here, occasionally what comes up is that you don't see your surfaces. Oops, clicked away from it. You don't see your surfaces inside of your drawing. So if you aren't seeing it in here, what it might be is that you don't have include surface bodies. So you try to place it and then you see it comes on blank. You have to make sure that you include surface bodies inside of your drawing. So that is our first tip for using surfaces. Now, our second tip, I'm going to show you how to patch a surface so then you can turn it into a solid body. So in this case, I do have this model. It looks solid, but it's not necessarily a solid. It doesn't have any of those properties that are attached to a solid. So if I go over to here just to show you, I'm going to show you the cross section. You could see that the cross section shows it's not a solid. It's just surface geometry. So there's no actual properties or material properties that are attached to this because there isn't any solid for it to actually attach it to. So let me grab one of these surfaces and show you an example of what it would look like if you were missing one. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Occasionally, you might receive a part, part maybe from a vendor or a third party that doesn't have all the surfaces attached to for a variety of reasons. And you maybe want to be able to add some physical properties to this. So what we can actually do is we can actually patch this up and then create a solid out of this. So in order to patch it up, I'm going to go up to the patch tool, just right up here on our surface tools. Now, if I just hover over these, you can see it's selecting a loop. I don't want it to select a loop right now, so I'm going to turn off the automatic edge chain. And then I'm going to select these 4 boundaries where this surface would go. So then I can go ahead and click OK or apply. And then you can see that it now added a surface to the bottom of my part. So now this is a fully enclosed solid or a fully enclosed surface body. So I can go up to the top over to my stitch tool and click on that. And now I can select all of these surfaces. I'm just going to grab everything. I can grab everything from my model browser, or I can go over to my model tree and grab all of these surfaces. So now you can see I have 76 selected. I'm going to click apply. In this window, you do have to make sure to click apply. If you click done, it's actually not going to do anything. So I'm going to go back into there, select, click apply. You can see that all of my surfaces were now combined into a single stitch surface. And now I have a full solid here. And you can see inside of these 2 folders, the surface bodies have their own separate folder. And now I have my solid body folder, which you're probably used to seeing inside of your part files. So in here are all those surfaces that I used. And then here is the single solid. So now I can go ahead and apply a material to this. So let me just pick a material. I'm just going to pick steel. And now I will have those physical properties attached to this part. That is our second tip. Our third tip is going to be using offset. So I'm going to go back inside of my Inventor file. I'm going to close this one out. Close out the drawing. And I'm going to go ahead and open up this similar part. You can see that this one is a little inset here. So the way this part would go is I would grab this with my hand right here. And let's say I want to add a grip to this part. So I want to add another solid into this part file with the grip that then would be its own separate part, and I would manufacture separately. So one way I can do that is to go ahead and go inside of the thicken and offset tool. So that's up here in the modify. What I'm going to do, let me pull the window over, is I'm going to grab these 3 surfaces, these 3 faces on my part, and I'm going to create a surface. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up here and turn it onto surface mode. And then I can go in and select my 3 faces. And in this case, I actually want these to start where that face starts. So I'm going to set the offset distance to 0. And then I'm going to click OK. And now you could see it created a surface for me right here, right where those three faces are. So now if I want to go in and create my solid grip, I would go back into thicken offset. This time I would turn off the surface mode. The surface mode, instead of creating 3D solid geometry, it creates a surface. So if I turn that off, this time it will create solid geometry. And this time I will actually turn on this quilt selection. And the quilt selection allows me to grab a surface instead of a solid body face. So I'm going to grab that surface that I already created. And then I'm going to give this a distance of, let's say, 0.15. And I want this to be its own separate new solid. I'm going to name that grip. And now you can see that I created a nice grip on my camera handle that I can then manufacture separately. And since it is its own solid, it is now a multi-body part, and I can export this out as its own separate part file that then, if I needed to, I can unbend and then stamp separately, or I can keep it the way it is and have it manufactured maybe out of plastic where it already comes in this shape. And now if I were to create a little bit of a fillet on the edge of it, let me go ahead and close loop. Let's see, hopefully I can grab this. I can add a fillet all the way around. Grab all these. And it's too big. So now I have this own separate grip on my camera handle, and I can assign it its own material or look. So if I want it to be, let's say, different color, there you can see a better look of the separate solids that I have. Any questions so far?
It doesn't look like we have any questions here or on YouTube.
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump into 4. So fourth tip is going to be creating I'm going to start with a new part, and then I'm going to go into my already created part. So if you do have a sketch, I think the thing we're all used to having is a closed loop sketch. So if we have, let's just say, a circle in here. So you can see we have a closed loop sketch, and the way most of us are used to using this is just extruding a solid out of this. But with most of the tools inside of here, you can actually also create a surface. So in this case, if I turn on the surface tool, which you'll see at the top right, we saw it inside of the thicken offset tool, we can create a surface. So if I click OK, you can see that now I have a surface. And you can actually create surfaces even without a closed loop sketch. So I think one of the issues I've seen people run into is they have a sketch where they, let's say, have a design that looks, for the most part, closed loop, but let's say I set this slightly off. So from a distance, it does look like it is a closed loop, but then they run into this where it's a surface when they get to the extrude. So if you're not careful, you might have a surface come out of your sketch. In this case, I do want to show how we can use surfaces purposefully. So if I go and open up a mouse surface. So in this case, I created some extrusions with my open sketches. So I created 2 surfaces on each edge. I created a revolve for this almost half egg looking shape. And then I have one of my origin planes here. So another way you can use surfaces is for the sculpt tool. So with the sculpt tool, if I go up here at the top under my surface toolbar, brings up my sculpt tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select surfaces. Now, you can use origin planes as well. You can also use work planes if you have some that you want to use. So in this case, I decided to make it on my XZ plane. So I don't have to create a separate one for it. I can just select it here inside of my model tree. So in this case, I selected all of my surfaces. You can see these little circles with arrows coming out of each end. This is going to be the direction that it cuts into the part. So for these surfaces on each side, I'm actually going to select the inward facing arrow. And that's going to cut off these two edges from each of those sides. So now I can click OK. And then you can see that from those surfaces that I had, I created this sort of mouse looking shape that then I can use further in my design and use that solid geometry for a lot of these other tools. Okay, I do have a couple questions, which I think I can answer as a good stop. So for the surfaces that I open initially inside of this grip, if I were to delete the surfaces, yes, it would delete the solid that I created, because what this solid is, it's a feature. So similar to how you can use a sketch inside of a 3D feature, if you delete the sketch, you then delete the 3D feature. So in this case, it's the same way, where if I delete these surfaces, I'll go ahead and delete the feature. For the one that I opened, I use an IGS file. And then that's the one that I use to create these 3D surfaces. Of course, it could be a part file, it could be a step file that you receive. You'll get the similar window popping up. I'm going to close out of this. Close out of these. And open up my last example. So for the last tip, it's using freeform modeling to create a 3D solid out of a surface. So I'm not going to get too into 3D freeform modeling, because there's a whole lot of tools within freeform, but I'll go ahead and show how you can use a simple surface model. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new part. And in this one, I'm going to drop down this freeform tool. And inside of the freeform, there is a plane tool. Similar to a sketch, I'm going to select the plane that this is going to go on. The point that is the center. And then I'm going to select the length and width. So in this case, I know what I want to create. I want to create a skateboard. So I know the length. The final length I want is going to be 32. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go with 33. I'm going to create 6 faces lengthwise. And then the final width I want is going to be 7.5. So I'm going to go 8. And I'm going to go 4 here. Now, if I do want symmetry, so what symmetry does inside of the freeform space is if I select, let's say, length symmetry, if I select an edge on this side over here on the right, it's going to grab the same edge on the left. This is something you can actually add in later on. But for now, I'm going to select both of them because I do want this to be symmetrical, both length and width. And I'm going to click OK. So there is a whole lot of tools inside of freeform. I'm not going to go into them. The tool that I'm going to use is going to be the edit form. The edit form tool, which is right up here. And that allows me to move these nodes and edges. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that tool. And I'm going to go ahead, and the first thing I want is to actually grab each of these edges and create the top end of each edge for the surfboard or for the skateboard. So I'm going to just go ahead and go up right there and click check. And then you can see that this is symmetrical. Because I added that symmetry, I only had to grab it from one side. So now I'm going to go ahead and edit form one more time. And I'm going to grab this point here and bring down the edges a little bit. And then once again, click OK. And right here, I'm just selecting these nodes and edges, so I can select these planes. There are a lot more tools in here, but I'm only right now just simple grabbing the separate faces. So in this case, I want to grab these. And I'm going to bring them down so it's a little concave to stand on. And then click OK. And then now I have my final surface. So when I click OK, finish my freeform, you can see that it's going to pop it up as a form here. And this is a surface model because there's no 3D solid geometry yet. It's just a surface. So the next thing that I want to do is actually give it some thickness. So I'm going to go back into the thicken offset. Because there is no 3D solid, I don't have to turn on this tool. It just kind of finds that I have a surface to select. So I'm just going to give that a bit of a thickness. I'm going to give it I think a 1/2 inch. Click OK. And then now I have a 3D solid. Now to cut out the actual board, I'm just going to create another sketch on my origin plane and create a slot to center. Or center point slot, and create this. So I'm going to give it my dimensions. I want the diameter to be 7.5 and the length to be 32. I think that's what I had. I can go to 28. I think I made it a little shorter than I wanted. Oh, I grabbed the wrong length here. I want an edge to edge length. So grab that point, and that should be 32. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is create an extrusion, and I'm going to do a Boolean so they are intersecting, and that is the surface that I grabbed. So I'm going to go in through all, and then there I have my skateboard. Now this is 3D solid geometry, so if I need to maybe create some holes in here, I can create some holes and build off of this. I can assign this a material if I want to assign it a material. All right, so I do have some questions in here. So that was our last tip. So let me go back into our slide. So the 5 tips that we had, so file opening, managing, being able to use them as surfaces inside of your designs, patching, being able to then turn those surfaces into 3D solids, using an offset to create a surface and then create a solid out of that. And then a surface to a solid in the sculpt. And then the last one, the freeform solids. Excuse me. So I do see some questions. I'll go kind of through them. The program I'm using to quickly draw arrows, that's going to be Zoom It. So that allows me to do this or create these arrows. You estimate the right amount of surfaces when creating a new freeform. So inside of freeform, let's say if I realize I want more tools or more nodes in here. There are actually tools inside of here that allow me to divide it. So if I realize that then I want to add symmetry in different places, there's actually a tool for that up here. And there is a subdivide tool if I need to add more nodes. So let's say I click on this edge, I can then add in these separate nodes, add in more or less. And you can actually merge edges as well. Merge and combine, that's also an option inside of freeform. And then Brian, sorry, it's one of the questions that people don't. Okay, yeah, Brian, you're saying question the same thing. Yeah, so for any surface that I have, it's used almost like a sketch, since it's a tool to then build geometry down the line. So the surface ends up being a child of the feature that I use. So if I delete the child, I end up deleting the feature itself. So as a quick, this is a good note to make. So you want to make sure if you're using them, they do fall underneath the feature. So in this case, you could see that, let me exit this freeform. You could see that this, let's see, where's the thicken? So our surfaces, I don't think I used it in any of these, but like the mouse that I created, it then falls underneath that feature for the sculpt. So and the face is from freeform. So no, Wilson, so can the faces from freeform tool be maintained into the surface? They can't be, so that they fall in on their own tool. They aren't separated out after the fact. So these just exist inside of here. All right. Okay. Any other questions for me? I don't think I can see the YouTube ones in case there were any on there.
No, there's not any on there. Thank you so much. This was very thorough. And thank you guys for coming prepared with questions or asking questions.
All right. Okay. I guess, Christine, do you want to close it out?
Yes, thank you all so much for joining. Oh, you know what? We have one last question. Can forms be created with an assembly?
So they can, so inside of an assembly, you're not going to see that tool itself. But if you're doing like an edit in place, you will be able to see it. Freeforms are for parts. I don't think inside of an assembly, the only features that you get are cut features, so it wouldn't show up on there. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for answering that last minute question. And thank you all for joining today. We will see you in next week's session if we don't see you at one of our live upcoming in-person events. Have a great day, everyone. See you next week.
So no worries there. Just follow the same process of copying the information that you need, opening up the appropriate design, the assembly, doing a component replace, and you're on your way. Second question.
Says frame component structures are a little confusing in copy design. Also tube and pipe. Any copy flow suggestions?
Oh, yeah, I was afraid somebody was going to bring this up. So when it comes to routed systems, you know, like tube and pipe, frame generator, those things can be a little bit challenging because of the way, like take frame generator as an example. When we develop frames in frame generator, right, we go through this process of having to apply very specific file names to them. In a lot of instances, we're copying everything from a frame because the potentiality that, say, an end treatment might be slightly different, material might be different from member to member, things along those lines. So yeah, copy design within, say, like tube and pipe and frame generator is always going to be a challenge in terms of best practices. And it's going to kind of vary from company to company. If you're using frame gen, a lot of the cases, you're almost better off just, you know, creating a new design every time, as opposed to copying a frame gen and then manipulating a frame gen design. In a lot of instances, it's better just to start a frame, or if you're using a lot of static stuff, or perhaps even, and I've seen this a number of times, say you have a lot of frames, if you're using frame generator or pipe runs in tube and pipe. A lot of the time, they're going to be similar in foundation, but as you evolve the design, that's where the variables start coming in. So if you can understand where that baseline is, that boilerplate design might be, take your frame gen and then do that much of it. And then from there, you have a foundation, a basis. Maybe it's 20, 30, 50% complete. And then you need to add that last bit to it. That's probably a better way of doing it than starting from scratch every single time. So essentially developing foundational templates in order to facilitate that process. Third question.
So this is our last question from Eric. It says, wouldn't you use Design Assistant from Windows Explorer to do a copy design?
Yeah, you could use Design Assistant. That's probably another way of doing it, as opposed to doing the manual method. Or if you're not using Vault, to not use copy design in Vault. But Design Assistant, yeah, I mean, that is a good tool to use as well, because it's out of the box Inventor. I've never been a big fan of Design Assistant. I think it was one of the original design reuse functions that were implemented, or that was made available to work with Inventor file associations. However, over the years, I mean, I've seen a lot of people struggle with it and not be very happy with its usability. It's not very user friendly. But yeah, it's definitely another method that you could institute in terms of a reuse strategy. But once again, copy design inside of the Vault, save and replace inside of Inventor. Those are the two best methods that you could use. Very good call, Eric.
Great. Well, it looks like those are all of our questions. Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, my pleasure. And guys, if you have any questions at any point, go ahead, call our support line, shoot us an email, reach out to me. Be more than happy to provide as much insight as I possibly can about all sorts of different things that we do here at KETIV, not just about Vault and not just about Inventor.
Great. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and we'll see you guys all next week. Thanks, Tom.